Hi there, and welcome back to the Message Marketing Pod. I'm your host, Christopher Melotti from Melotti Content Media, and this is another edition, or special edition, of our Corporate Identity series, which is becoming one of the most requested and most important, I feel, topics at the moment, which is like taking branding to another level, which is like corporate identity, defragmentation of organizations, and unity. So I'm going to introduce you to our two guests in 1 second. That is Darlene and Kristin, and I'll get them to introduce themselves in a second. But we wanted to talk today or explore the topic of staff sentiment and how people are feeling when it comes to when their leadership feels fragmented. There's a bit of a lack of alignment. You know, we're seeing hybrid workforces and whole disruption of the organizational unit. And that's washing over people's emotions, people's direction and purpose. And that is obviously causing tensions and issues. And we wanted to explore that a little bit more today. So I'll get Darlene to introduce herself, then Kristin to introduce himself, and then we will start the conversation. Darlene, do you want to begin?
Thank you. Yes, Darlene Mattiske-Wood. I'm CEO of Australian Military Bank. I am particularly interested in leadership, all things human behaviour. I consider myself as a bit of a novice anthropologist. I really love observing patterns of behaviour and how people behave in organisations. And I've made that a bit of a study for about 25 years, along with personality profiling. So great to be here. Thank you very much.
Nice. And Kristin?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Kristin Hancock. I'm a principal at Swatch. We are a brand identity and design agency. And at Swatch, we spend our entire focus looking at the foundations of brands and how to make strong brands.
Wonderful. All right. So let's discuss. So this new world we live in today, which is very hybrid, very production focused, productivity focused, efficiency focused. There's this relentless pursuit for forward direction and momentum. And obviously we're dealing with humans here, and humans have emotions and purpose and guidance, and that lives within the organism that is a business. So, I mean, Darlene, do you want to kick us off here when it comes to around like how leadership can fragment in these kind of situations and what that means for business?
Yeah, I was looking at something the other day around just the stats in terms of what's happening in the economy, and unemployment's reasonably low. So, it can actually be quite hard to find all the right talent, but confidence is down. Interest
I've
rates.
seen that too.
Yeah, interest
Cash
rates
flow.
are. Yeah. There's a few issues going on out there. Productivity is a big item at the moment that's discussed in the government sector. Keeping inflation at the right level so we don't have bigger problems into the future. That has an impact on the cash rate and interest rates and things like that. But it's interesting that and I think that's contributing to confidence being down. And don't get me started on the housing market and the lack of housing and all of those. If we talk inside of an organisation, I do think that some of the pressures and the cost of living, etc., does actually have an impact on how people are feeling in an organisation, because you bring your whole self to work. But on top of that, I get a sense that there's a lot of sort of exhaustion in some sectors or in some organisations, and I get a sense that some people are tired and feel a little bit burnt out, and I wonder if there's the pressure to do more with less.
Can I just, and not to cut you off, but this, Darlene, that's exactly what everyone is seeing right now. Sorry to cut you, but like I couldn't agree more, because that's what I did a poll on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and I was like, what's going on, everyone? Everyone feels a bit burnt out? And I did a poll, everyone picked burnout. Everyone, and when I speak, Kristin and I go to a lot of conferences and events and things, and we see everyone is just so tired and burnt out from pushing last year. And it's like we had the Christmas break, we came back and realized that we still weren't over it. And I feel like there's interest rates went up, which and cash flow problems, and everyone's dragging their feet. It's the most weirdest time I've ever seen in business over the last 10 years. Sorry
that's okay. Christmas is not a break.
Yeah, clearly not.
Those that celebrate Christmas, I mean, I find that holiday season around that time frame is often incredibly intense, and so come back to the workplace and it's back on again, hit the ground running. But I do see that there's sort of the whole productivity, doing more with less. I think leadership is very much first and foremost about trust in the way that one carries themselves, but leaders are tired as well. So in that situation, it does become difficult where leaders have to choose every day what people need from me and how am I showing up and presenting. And I think the issue is if you don't have a framework that you're drawing on when things get tough. So when I get really, I can get really burnt out, and I felt that way at the end of the year, and I go back to frameworks that I have where I'm not then flying by the seat of my pants. I'm actually saying, okay, go back to your framework. What's required now? Where are you at as a leader, and where is the organisation at in terms of the operating model and our growth path, and what's happening inside the organisation in terms of engagement. And if you have frameworks, you can draw on those when you're exhausted. And so asking staff and understanding where they're at and why, and then bringing people in to look at how do we actually make change in the workplace, taking into consideration where you're at and your whole self, your family dynamics, etc., because that becomes really important to understand you, and also educate around productivity and what you're aiming for. If you give people clear direction, but take into consideration what's happening for them and what they need, the help they need to actually get there, that becomes really important. But that's really just a solution to a bigger problem. And I think having a framework around and going back to what do we stand for, what are we all about, and what's important. And it constantly, I think, have to remind yourself and your leadership team. So I'm about to go into leadership strategy next week, and we're going to spend a whole day on leadership and corporate identity. And
there you go.
What are we projecting to the organisation? What do our people need? How's our identity going in terms of our staff in the organisation? Every week that we have an executive meeting, I always test the barometer of the internal environment and the external. And the internal is how staff engagement, what are their concerns, how did they receive particular messages, are they coping, are there any sort of burning issues? Because if you're not taking that pulse all the time and taking that into consideration, as a leader, it's easy to get complacent. And the leadership that you have is a given leadership. You're anointed as, okay, there you are, you're the leader. The best leadership is where you may not be anointed as a leader, you are a leader by how you behave. And that takes consideration for human behaviour and what's happening with people, so that you demonstrate that you care, so they in turn care. But I think going back to what you're projecting in your organisation as a leadership team, an individual and as a team, is really important. If trust starts to erode, you then start to actually erode your corporate identity and your brand. So,
That's so important. And Kristin, I'll let you jump in a second, but I think that what you're trying to say there is that it's important that leaders don't recognize the corporate identity drift. Because something that Kristin and I say a lot is that your corporate identity is there whether you like it or not. It's whether you define it, take control of it or not. And so I think what you're trying to say there is that when you become a leader, you can get complacent and things can drift. And I loved what you said, which is people take their whole selves to work. It's not like it's not like a mask anymore. It's like people come and there's, people are different and feeling different and have different emotional reactions. And as a result, a corporate identity helps unite that. Kristin, do you want to jump in?
I think very right to point out some of the sort of like the macro challenges and also localized business challenges that are affecting businesses in Australia today. One is there is low unemployment, which means there's little movement of talent between businesses, but within that, there's a lot of pressure on the individual, both in their personal environment, because there's high costs of living, But there's a lot of pressure in business at the moment to get more from what they've already got, because there is a lot of margin pressure. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of cost pressure on profitability. So that means that leaders are looking to get more out of their teams. But you've got the added dynamic, I think, now, and I think we've touched on this outside of this podcast, around working from home versus working in the office, and the connectivity issues and connectivity pressures and cultural pressures that'll put on the organisation. So I totally agree with what Darlene was saying. Leaders need, at all levels of the business, they need a structure that they can lean into for consistency, so that they can build that consistency of trust, and they can have this automation of decision making, so that there's, I think in previous podcasts we talked about the velocity of decision making, but then there's the automation side of it, which says, okay, in this environment we can make the following decisions, and you get that from having the clarity of purpose and the unity of purpose from within the top leadership that permeates down. But for it to actually work at a lower level, it needs to have visibility. So you need to be able to communicate and evidence in your communication. You need to be able to communicate visually, these are our values and this is how we respond in these environments, because there is just disconnection between employees and leaders at the moment. And it's very easy, as you were saying, I think earlier, Chris, around there's a tiredness. There's a tiredness in the workforce. So you need to be able to get up each day, know why you're doing it, know how you respond in different environments, and then there's trust within the employees. Now, we talk about, within the corporate identity framework, we talk about the articulation of it, we talk about the reinforcement of it, and we talk about the visibility of it. And it's making sure that you're questioning and reinforcing and saying, have we got those aspects in place?
Yeah.
And they can be really simple. They really can be simple, as much as just, okay, let's just show a day-to-day activity that our leaders face every time they get up and they get a decision making. Let's record the actions that a good leader in our business has done. Let's align it to the values that we do and show the outcome from a value proposition to the customer. And then communicate that as a simple case study, either through the video or even, God, it could even be on a screensaver across the organisation. Those little steps help the reinforcement. Is that where you were heading? Sorry, I've just monologued there.
I really like,
Chris, but yeah.
I like that corporate identity drift. I might use that. We need to get the rescue helicopters out there for those that are out there in the ocean on the corporate identity drift. I do think that once you do have, are we demonstrating what we talk about or what we stand for, and continually checking that is really important. But I think one of the things that I'm seeing or I'm hearing about is where there are individuals that they'll get their view of or their frameworks from YouTube or from reading something. So read a few books and say, okay, now I've got it. This is what I need to do, and it's almost like it's contrived. If they don't understand human behaviour, it's going to look really clumsy. And there's a few things about implementing identity or working on the culture in an organisation that really does go to the heart of understanding change management and human behaviour, because there's a way in which you do things where you can make it 1,000 times worse or 100 times better really quickly. And I do see some situations where the drive for more productivity and pushing for results, because that's part of the leader's identity, without understanding the impacts on human behaviour and how things hang together. Are
you talking about like where you've got a framework, a soundbite of reference, but you don't actually understand the deeper, the layers,
and
whether it's relevant for your organisation?
Absolutely, there's nothing worse than, I've always said. Someone asked me once, what particular study or author do you follow in terms of strategy or leadership? And I said, well, there's quite a few, but I always look at what the organisation needs first.
And that's how it should
then
be.
I'll look. Yeah, not the other way around. I've got, this is my framework and I'm just going to apply this. Or this is the framework that I believe is good and I'm just going to retrofit that. So I'm just going to, sandwich that in. You've got to look at an organisation and where they're at and what the history is, and understand what the leaders in the organisation, being the board or whoever the key stakeholders, what they're actually looking to achieve first up.
Yeah.
Before you start applying any sort of framework, you pick a framework that fits that particular situation and scenario. And I think if you don't have an understanding of what's happening with the culture, what's happening with the operating model and the target market and the business model, if you don't have that basis first, you're just going to take your little kit bag of tools, or one, sometimes I've seen, and apply that. The other thing that I see, and I've seen a couple of times, is where an organisation grows quite quickly, could be small and moving quite quickly, and they are not able to keep up with the growth in terms of frameworks that support people in the organisation. I see totally. That, and that leads to a lot of burnout. And it's not that leaders don't. It's not that they have ill intent.
No.
They don't know. They don't understand change management and the psychology of people, and that if you don't do things in the right way and in the right sequence, you'll make things worse, not better.
Yeah,
I agree.
And we see that a lot with smaller, to medium organisations transitioning into, larger organisations, or small transitioning into medium, where a lot of that reference in terms of references actually come from the entrepreneur or the founding owner or the founding families. And there's only, as the organisation grows, there's only so much that they can communicate without having a framework around them, because a lot of it previously just came through word of mouth. They would say, this is how I did it. They'd evidence their behaviour, and then they'd reinforce it because they had their hands on all the touch points within the organisation. But as it gets bigger and there's more people to engage and interact with, that then get dissipated and they get further away from the factory floor, for want of a bit of terminology, and then the message gets dissipated. So if you don't have those frameworks, if you don't have the clear articulation of it, and if you don't evidence the behaviour to reinforce it, then we find that that's where you encounter a lot of those problems. It gets very watered down, that message.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I think we do have a bit of a crisis of leadership in a lot of situations with organisations. And I think the corporate identity is part of that, but I think before that can actually be introduced, there's almost like there has to be pain.
Yeah.
Where people can see that what I did to get results quickly isn't working anymore.
Yeah. So you feel you need to have a burning platform, so that must be present, or can you just have an environment where actually you just make it better, or does it need to be dysfunctional first?
I actually think if someone doesn't understand the connection and the importance of identity, symbolism, leadership, trust, and how that impacts on human behaviour, if they don't have that understanding, then you do have to have a crisis.
Right. When you say if that person, do you mean the leadership team, or is it?
It could be the board, it could be the CEO, it could be the C-suite.
Yeah. But okay, I understand. Yeah,
people will take their cue from the leader and the C-suite. They'll actually look at that. So a good example: if let's say there's a scenario where it's really poor productivity, and there is no standard that is about doing the best. So there's no sort of the standard is whatever, I'll turn up if it works for me, and I'm not don't anyone give too much, you'll make the rest of us look bad. That sort of attitude. It sounds terrible, but that's led by acceptance of bad performance. It's led by not having a framework around performance standards and what the expectations are that is going to, the commitment to elite standards, for example. And when I say elite, I'm not talking about elite athletes. I'm just talking about a standard that is going to achieve the results in a way that fits your values. So if there isn't a commitment to that, first off, if you don't understand that, you haven't got that in place, and then you can't drive a commitment to that. If there's no commitment to that, and the standard that's set by the leaders at the top isn't to drive that and call out bad behaviour, etc., and demonstrate that that sort of unacceptable kind of like behaviour, if that isn't called out and reinforced, then it will be accepted. That's the way we do things around here.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree there. I think you've raised a good point, because if the CEO or the leadership team doesn't have the recognition that behind that activity is actually there's an identity and a cultural piece, because the natural knee-jerk reaction is, well, let's put in a KPI and we'll measure them against a KPI. So we'll try and force behaviour instead of reinforcing behaviour. They're very different terminology there. So, yeah, I definitely agree. And it takes an element of awareness of organisational behaviour and people behaviour to actually enact that. So I think it's really important that shift has to occur, where they can't just KPI things, and because you're looking for sustainability of change. You're not just looking for, oh, look, why can't I just measure something and get an outcome? You've actually got to have the sustainability of the change within the organisation. Yeah, no, I think that's really important.
And that's where the corporate identity comes in, right? I mean, I want to bring it back to what we're trying to do here, which is explain that the point of what we're trying to say for everyone listening and watching is that when it comes to corporate identity, it's not letting it sit in an ethereal space. It's coming together and uniting your team to define all of those attributes, both visually and and verbally, which is the whole like what we're doing, why we're here, what we're combining our forces for, what unites us in our ethos and our mission, our vision, our goals. Because I think that's what's happening is we've touched on a few topics here, which is pressure, anxiety, and feeling all burnout and exhaustion and siloed behavior, and especially with hybrid environments. I think it comes down to taking the initiative to doing the project of determining why you're here, what you're doing for what gives people energy again. I think that's what we're all trying to say here, is that if it just sits there, it's not going to work. Whereas if you sit there and go, why are we here? What we're doing together.
I was just going to say, it goes to the heart of, do you want sustainable success, or do you want quick results?
Correct.
Because if you want quick results, you can go in and find the low-hanging fruit and get them. But if you want sustainable success, then you've really got to build that with and through
foundation.
People and how you're actually creating that operating model that projects where you want to be and where you want to go. I think one of the dangers, though, is also not continually checking that, because no one wants a Kodak moment. We've been successful. What we need to change it.
Kodak, but yes,
the world's changing so fast.
Oh yeah.
So, the other thing I heard the other day, I thought this was interesting, which I didn't realise till I was really getting into AI, is that AI actually chews up more power.
Totally.
So it has an impact
on
water. The grid.
And water.
Oh, fantastic. Great.
I saw a stat the other day that if we build all the data centres that we expect, AI will use over a quarter of Sydney's current freshwater supply.
Yeah.
That was an interesting stat.
They said it uses as much as like Vegas does in a year or something ridiculous. Yeah. It's crazy.
Sorry, I cut you across there. Sorry.
Should we open a casino?
Please. Yeah.
That's going well, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got helicopter rescue for the corporate identity drift, and we'll open a casino. I think that I don't know what all the solutions are to everything, but I think constantly checking your corporate identity with the changes that are happening in the environment, and then communicating that is really important. What I've seen sometimes is leaders actually say, oh, wow, we have a problem, here's the solution. We now need to shift and we're going to put in just KPIs and focus people here or there. They've just worked out how to do the first set of KPIs. And then we say, okay, now look, change today. We need to row this way.
Yeah.
Lack of communication about the why, I think is part of the problem when we see people not understanding, what's happening and why this change. You told us this 2 months ago and now we're needing to adjust, but the world's changing that fast.
Yeah.
And whenever there is a change, you've got to up your communication by 100-fold. Can't express that enough, so that consistent communication and explaining things becomes critically important. I think that corporate identity drift is because we've got leaders that are that have had the drift, and it's too easy to get a little bit lazy about communicating and being authentic and being consistent, and because leaders are burnt out too. I don't know that there is an easy solution to that, other than engaging in the organisation and finding out what's happening for people and what they need and what the pain points are.
Yep. And have we covered everything sufficiently? Yes, I feel like we'll wrap this one up. Does anyone else have anything to add? I think we covered a lot in terms of just reminding everyone that leadership it requires unity, and that people come to work as human beings, and unity gives us strength, and that comes from a corporate identity. And I feel like in such a challenging and fast-paced time right now, this is all the more important reason as to why we need a corporate identity. Is there anything else, Kristin, Darlene, you want to add before we finish this one up?
No, look, I'm fine. I think we've reinforced all the key challenges there.
Darlene, you're good?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this special episode into corporate identity. I hope you're finding it as enjoyable as we are, because it obviously is a big topic that we need to really address in the business community and the executive level for going forward. So we'll do a few more episodes on this. So please keep subscribing to the Message Marketing Pod, and reach out obviously to Kristin and Darlene directly for any questions. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks everyone. Thank you for joining me, Kristin, Darlene.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Darlene.